Color makes up all of art. It's literally what we see when we're looking into space. And I would say that it's the soul of my work. You honestly you don't have to know about color theory to understand what looks good together. It's more about understanding contrast and harmony. But how do you take an abstract concept that is color and make it into a palette that works for you? For me, choosing colors is a deeply intuitive process, but it's also something that you can develop with practice. And so in this video, I'm going to walk you through my personal process with how I go about choosing my colors, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll see how intention and intuition can come together to create something really cool. Hi everyone, Happy New Year. I hope you've had a good start to your year and the next 365 days brings you all the best and brightest in life. I think this year is going to be a pretty big year for me, which is really exciting but also just as nerve-wracking. I'm actually in the middle of preparing my next exhibition, which is going to be in New York, which is honestly so surreal to even say out loud, but I'm so excited to show you guys what's in store. But for now, I wanted to talk to you about colors, or at least my personal process with picking colors when it comes to creating my paintings. I know a lot of you guys have asked me over the years about how I go about picking my colors. How do I know what colors look good together? So today, I thought in this video it'd be really good to kind of do a deep dive into my process when it comes to color. I never really had any formal education in color theory or art for that matter, so a lot of my early works came about with no clear color palette in mind, and it was almost more of an intuitive process where the colors would build as they go. But here's the thing, intuition is a skill, especially when it's intentionally developed and refined over time. While intuition does often feel very innate, it is deeply tied to our experiences and our emotions and even our pattern recognition and subconscious processing. And like any skill, it's something that you can grow with practice. And so today I'm going to take you behind the scenes of my process, not just to tell you how I pick colors, but to show you that building a color palette is so much more than just picking the pretty colors. It's about drawing inspiration from the world around us and seeing how each individual person can interpret the world in different ways. My friends and I have always found it somewhat amusing that although my world revolves around color, a lot of the times I'm hardly ever wearing it. Unless it's a pop of color here and there, I'm almost always in an all black outfit, but my painting uniform is generally an all white getup. I'm somewhat of a clumsy person, meaning I'm a very clumsy artist and I get paint everywhere. At some point during my painting process, I will get paint on me. I like the idea that white had this ability to reveal all other colors, and although it wasn't necessarily intentional at first, I think at a subconscious level, I chose to wear white because I liked that I could see where the paint was appearing over time, and it was almost like an extended canvas of my painting process and my journey. I think that color has honestly become one of the most important aspects of my art because it feels like the closest outward expression of my internal world. And that's not to say that I think that every color that I paint with has this deeper meaning or something like that, but rather that it is the lens through which I filter my world, and I guess literally everyone else too, but also symbolically, if you know what I mean. Like for example, you may have heard of the Beta-Meinhof phenomenon or the frequency illusion, but in case you don't, it's basically just a cognitive bias that makes your brain fixate on a particular thing or notice something more frequently after first seeing it. Although what I'm about to say isn't necessarily this phenomena, I do like to think that everyone has a unique fixation or a particular type of detail that they're naturally attuned to. For some, it might be certain shapes or people's mannerisms or fonts on signage. It could be repeating numbers or a particular sound. You know what I mean? Let me know what you think yours would be, because I'm always honestly so intrigued by this. I think it says a lot about a certain person. And for me, I think it would be colors, and more specifically, colors in unassuming places. I find that color stands out wherever I go, influencing the way I see and interpret the world. And I think that's why it's such an important and fundamental part of my art. So although I might not gravitate to color in my wardrobe, I always somehow find a way to express my love of color through my art. Although a lot of my practice is relatively intuitive, there are those days that inevitably happen where I feel completely uninspired by the colors that pop into my head, or I'm just drawing a blank. And so in those situations, I resolve this by going into my archives. I come across a lot of cool color combinations or unique shades in my daily life, whether I'm out and about in the world or just scrolling online. I have what I would call a little color library scattered throughout different apps on my phone, like my camera roll or my Instagram folders, and of course my Pinterest boards. I often make palette boards and save images that I come across that might not necessarily be aesthetically, visually pleasing, but they have a really cool color combination that I can refer back to when I'm feeling stuck. But in addition to that, in order to attract more color into my visual landscape and daily life, I like to follow a lot of online accounts that represent color in really unique ways. Like on Instagram, I follow a lot of floral artists who specifically make ikebana or really unique flower installations because they have this really cool, unique way of cohesively creating color palettes through plants and through real life objects. I'm really drawn to seeing how bright and almost unnatural colors can work together with earthy tones that are shown in a lot of plants, and I think floral artists do a great job at that. I'll show you guys a couple of my favorite accounts on the screen here for you guys to see some of the ones that I'm at least drawn to. Of course, this is all preference, so an aesthetic that I might like might not be the same for you guys. So it's really cool to build your own personal color landscapes that really aligns with how you see the world. Another source of inspiration online are makeup artists and nail technicians. I really like seeing how they blend different colors and textures together. It really inspires me to think differently about how colors can complement each other and different textures can really add to that. And of course, I follow so many visual artists who I believe have a really refined sense of color language. I love scrolling through their work and seeing how they've almost made their own art style out of colors, and they've created this color palette for themselves that is really distinctly them. And I think that's really cool when artists do that. So yeah, I recommend thinking about how you can pay attention to color in your daily life and potentially adding more of it into your visual landscape, whether it's following more accounts online where you really resonate with the way that they showcase their colors, or even focusing on unassuming objects in your daily life. Now, do keep in mind that a lot of the colors that you see in photos or a piece of existing art may not actually translate well into your own intended creation. Much of the inspo that I like to save are generally of physical objects or realistic images, but my work is abstract. This distinction is really important because abstraction and realism operate on different principles. Realism often aims to replicate the world as it appears, while abstraction aims to evoke emotions, experiences, ideas through shapes, colors, and things of that nature. And a lot of my work is abstract. As such, a lot of the colors and compositions in abstract work like my own don't always mirror the color palette from the intended reference image. One little hack that I like to use when I'm trying to determine whether a color palette from an image will work really well with my intended art piece is by running it through a pixelated image generator. It basically simplifies an image into its block colors and breaks it down into its main shades. And I find that this makes it so much easier to then determine how it might look in a cohesive palette. I'll show you guys an example on my phone so you kind of get to know what I mean by this. But essentially, you go on your device and then you go to your archives, wherever that might be. We'll do Pinterest for this one. And then I'll go to my palette board, and then I'll have a look and see if there's any color palette that is inspiring me today. I rather like this one. This is a really cool one because it's an actual image of a flower, and so we want to determine whether this real life image will convey the same sort of palette that a really nice palette that would be for an abstract painting, such as mine. So I'll screenshot that and I'll crop it, and then I'll go to Safari and then I'll upload it onto this app. You can use any pixel image generator app, but I'll link one below, the one that I'm using below, so that it's more streamlined, I suppose. So I'll attach it, I'll upload, and then here, this is the image, but you can change the pixel size to determine how in-depth you want your block shades to be. So let's do 100 for this one. So here you can kind of see it's a bit more generalized, but these are the main colors that are in this painting. But obviously you can make it more in-depth, so let's do maybe 50. And see here now it has a lot more color variety for you to work with, and see maybe you want to increase your palette to have more detail in it. But yeah, that's essentially it. Once I've broken down the palette and I know the colors that I'm really excited to work with, the next step is actually bringing these colors to life on canvas. The first step for me is always determining the focus colors. These aren't always going to be the main colors of the actual piece at the end of the day, but it is a foundation for where the palette will start. Let's say the color I really want to work with right now is purple. Then I would ask myself, do I want this purple to be in the foreground or the background? Because this really changes the direction of where the palette and the painting would go. When it's a brighter or a deeper color, I usually make that into my foreground, because lighter foregrounds can sometimes get overshadowed by the brighter background. It really does depend on personal preference ultimately, but this is just a good place to start for me. So instead, if I'm working with a softer pastel purple, it would be really good as a background, because then it allows my brighter colors to really shine through in the composition. Once I've set the focus color, then the next step is actually building harmony, and this is where I'll think about which colors will complement each other. I've made a lot of pieces that are softer, pale, and lighter, and this is considered low contrast because it's not always as obvious where or what the composition is, whereas a high contrast image uses bolder and brighter colors, and so you would know exactly what you're looking at when you're looking at a painting. All of these paintings are actually what I would consider a high contrast painting, especially like see with this black and white one. The white is a paler color and the black is deeper, high contrast colors, so you can really see exactly what the composition is for this piece. For softer or low contrast pieces, I usually gravitate towards these light pastel colors because this creates a calm and more ethereal mood and invites the viewer to explore a bit further. High contrast pieces using bold colors can be really striking and create a really cool, vibrant dynamic in those situations. Ultimately, both approaches are just as powerful as each other. It's more about understanding what story you want to tell with your creation and the narrative that you're building with your color palette. So when you're building your color palette, start by determining your focus colors, and then from there ask yourself whether it's foreground or background. Then you can decide whether you want it to be soft and subtle or loud and striking. And with time, a lot of these decisions will come more naturally to you, and you'll build your intuition when it comes to picking your palette. Color is such an important part of my work, and it can be the same for you guys. That's why I really wanted to share with you at least my personal approach to colors, because it allows you to communicate more clearly your emotions or your stories or the experiences that you want to interpret through your art. But it is also something that's constantly evolving. The colors that I pick now will likely not be my preference in a month's time, and the same for you. The way that you approach your color picking journey, I guess, is going to be maybe different from mine, but I hope that you can gain inspiration to seeing how you can pay attention to color a bit differently in these certain types of practices. But yeah, that's basically all I had to say today. I hope it gives you a glimpse into my art process and maybe even inspires you to see colors a bit differently. Colors are everywhere, you just have to pay attention to them. But remember, there's honestly no right or wrong way to approach this. What's important is what feels true to you. But let me know if you have your own favorite ways of exploring colors, or if any of my approaches inspired you to do that. I'd love to hear from you, and thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.